Welcome. And last week we were going to talk about something that this week I want to speak about. And that is choice and blame. If you were here last week, I mentioned that it was important in making any kind of commitment to take responsibility for it. And we often blame others or circumstances rather than take responsibility. Has anyone out there ever heard the saying, a bad workman blames his tools? Any of you ever heard that? He can't get the job done, so instead of taking responsibility, he just blames his tools. Oh, it's the tools. Anyone ever heard that? Yeah, so the idea is, rather than see what deficiency I have, we look for deficiency outside ourselves. So it's very easy to do that. And when we want to commit to something, or we want to discipline ourselves, and it's difficult, or we find it impossible to do, then we often look for the reasons why we can't do it. So we justify why it couldn't be done or why it's not possible. It's really a losing mentality. Rather than think why we can't do it, we should think, what should we think? We should think, well, how can I do it? Because if you only focus on why you can't do it, then you convince yourself you can't do it. And if you focus on what are the possible ways to do it, or what mentality would be required to do it, what activities would be required to be successful, then you start to see ways that you can do it, and then you stop blaming situations or your own inadequacies and start coming up with solutions and ideas. So many commitments that we make at a certain point in time, after we make them, become difficult to maintain, and sometimes they seem impossible to us. And when we feel they're impossible, then the next stage is what? We feel like quitting. So Srila Prabhupada, of course, was not a quitter, and he didn't want us to be a quitter, and he wanted us to find the ways and means to be successful. As I mentioned a story once, that one devotee was having difficulty following, and they were telling Prabhupada that he's sincere, but he's having difficulty because of weakness. And Prabhupada's remark was, well, why should you give in to weakness? In other words, weakness sounded like a good excuse, and apparently the devotees thought that if they told Prabhupada that this other devotee was weak but sincere, Prabhupada would be sympathetic. Oh, he's weak, like circumstantially, there's nothing he can do about it. That's just what he is. That's his nature. And Prabhupada said, no. Why are you giving into weakness? So giving into weakness is a mentality. It's an acceptance of defeat, that I can't do something. So a very interesting thing came up in my study of the subject of vows. In Sanskrit, the word for vow is brata. Sometimes in Hindi they'll say brat. I'm taking a brat. I'm taking a vow, whatever. It's a vow to fast, a vow to chant a certain number of rounds, a vow to not eat something, I won't eat any sugar for a month, or a vow not to criticize anyone, like that. So in Sanskrit it's brata. In colloquial Indian languages, it's often referred to as brat. So one of the meanings of this word brata, other than vow, or a definition of the word vow, is choice. And that's an interesting definition, isn't it? Because when we make a vow, basically we are choosing to do something, and of course choosing not to do something. That means the power of the vow is within our grasp, that we are making a choice. A lot of times, when we're in situations that are difficult, we may think we don't have a choice. We're forced to act circumstantially in a particular way. And that is a recipe for failure. If you think that way, then you set yourself up to fail, because you're acknowledging that in these conditions I cannot succeed. As I was saying before, if you're in a situation where you see conditions in which you think you cannot succeed, the smart thing to do is, in that situation, think, how can I succeed within the circumstances and the facilities, resources I have? How can I succeed? Rather than give into the idea that, well, according to this situation, I can't succeed. So that's where choice comes in, because if we don't have choice, then we can say, yes, these are the situations, and in this situation, we might think anybody would fail. But if there's choice, then there's choices how to deal in that situation, deal with the situation, deal with yourself, with your own mentality. So, interesting thing happened to me many years ago. I was preparing. I decided I wanted to study the topic of forgiveness, and I would like to give a seminar on it, which I have done many times. And next week we're going to begin a new section, and we're going to discuss forgiveness. So this will be like a little preliminary lead up to the end of vows and the beginning of forgiveness, and how it relates is with this word choice. I was reading a book on forgiveness by a Christian pastor. It was actually a wonderful book, and right in the beginning he said something which was very difficult for me to accept. He said, forgiveness is a choice. And at that time when I read that, I had been hurt by several people. And I was hurt so bad that I hadn't really forgiven them, at least not fully forgiven them. And so when he said forgiveness is a choice, I felt that I had no choice in the matter, that I was hurt. I felt resentful. And maybe time would heal. As we say, time, as it said, time heals all wounds. And I thought, okay, perhaps in time it will heal, but I don't have a choice in the matter. This is how I feel, and that's that. So that statement intrigued me, to say the least, and I had some doubt. I didn't really understand how that could be true. So as the book continued, he made the point that forgiveness, or any emotional issue we're dealing with, I wouldn't say any emotional, but many emotional issues we're dealing with, we can make choices. So in this case, forgiveness was a choice. You can let go of the resentment. You could make that choice. And I thought, well, that is a Krishna conscious, definitely a Krishna conscious concept, that a concept of detachment. That if we're detached, and if we are to be detached, or if we want to be detached, and we are attached to something which is inhibiting our bhakti, our devotion, our service, our spiritual advancement, then a sadhaka, one who's practicing bhakti, should let that go. Let, as it said, accept what's favorable and reject what's unfavorable. So resentment is not favorable. Generally, it's not favorable. So therefore, we should let it go. We should become detached from resentment, of the anger we're feeling towards someone who has hurt us. But before I read the book, I thought that was not possible. I thought it was just simply that one is hurt, and then one has to heal over time, if one even does heal. And then he's saying, no, you can choose to let it go. I thought, well, that's an interesting concept, because I didn't think that was possible. So what I learned from that is that we have more choices than we may think we have. We can choose to act in a particular, we can choose to commit ourselves. Of course, we have to be in the right mentality. We have to assess our abilities and disabilities, because we can't do anything. But I would say there are many things we can do that in our present state we may think we cannot do. But it's more accurate to look at it from the point of choice and say, I am choosing not to do that, rather than say I can't do it. And so if you replace the word choose, excuse me, if you replace the word can't with choose, it's generally more accurate. So you might say, or you might feel, I can't do this. Well, I couldn't follow these spiritual principles, or I couldn't rise at this time of the morning, and I couldn't chant this number of rounds, and I couldn't practice this. And then replace it with the word, I choose not to do this. then as you say it, you will feel generally, for most things, you'll feel that's a more accurate assessment of the situation, that you could do it if you chose to, that you're not totally bound. I mean, if you have heavy addiction, that may be another thing. You can't immediately just choose to give it up. But I'm saying in the general sense, in terms of our commitments or vows we want to make, that often it's a question of simply making the choice that now I choose to do this. So that's fundamental. If we don't have that, then we just work ourselves into a corner and say, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. And then we convince ourselves. Now, take it a little step further. This is very interesting and really important. What's going on on another level, even deeper? Oftentimes, if not always, what's going on is there may be some belief, and the belief may be saying, I'm not capable, I'm not qualified, I'm not able, I'm not intelligent enough, I'm not whatever, I'm not fill in the blanks enough to be able to do this. So actually, you may have the ability, you may have the ability to make the choice and the ability to do something, but you have a belief which stems around perhaps lack of confidence in yourself or lack of confidence in the power of Krishna consciousness. We had spoken about that in another class. The lack of confidence in the mercy of the Guru, a lack of confidence or faith in the power of the holy name. There may be some belief which is causing you to say, I can't do it. So if you isolate that belief, then you may realize that you actually could do something, but your mind or your beliefs are there and they're saying, no, you can't. And Prabhupada tells a story about a man. Well, there's friends, so-called friends. They wanted to play a joke on this man, and every day this man walked down a road in the village to work or whatever he was doing. And so the friends said, let's play a joke on him. And the road went for a mile or so and said, let's line up on the road and we'll all line up like a third of a mile apart. And then when we see him, we'll go into a state of shock and we'll scream and tell him, you've become a ghost, and just become frightened. So he's walking on the road. One of the friends sees him. He says, oh no, and pretending to be really scared. You become a ghost. You become a ghost. Oh no, you become a ghost. And the man's thinking, what is he talking about? I'm not a ghost. So he walks, obviously he doesn't know what's going on, but then he meets the next friend a third of a mile down the road, and his friend says the same thing. Oh, what happened to you? You become a ghost. And then he walks another third of the mile. Another friend says that, another third of the mile. So 4 or 5 friends have said that to him. So what do you think he's thinking? You think that's affecting him? Well, let's put it in modern day terms. Let's say you have a goal in life, career goal or a spiritual goal or whatever it may be, particular goal in life. And your friends decide to play a trick on you, and they say, okay, whenever we see so-and-so, tell him he'll never be successful at doing that. It just doesn't have what it takes. So see your friends and your friends say, I heard you were going to try to do such and such. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think you're really cut out for that. I don't think you should do it. It's really not your nature. It's not where your talents lie. Okay, so you hear that. And then a few days later, meet another friend. I heard you set a goal to do such and such. You're never going to succeed. I wouldn't even try if I were you. You're just not that good. So you're hearing this from all your friends over a period of 1 or 2 weeks. What do you think would happen? You think that would have an effect on you? Now, what if they told you the opposite? What if every time they saw you, they said, oh, you have this goal, you are the right person. You're going to be so good at that. Yeah, you get totally discouraged, Glenn says, yeah. And then the opposite would be true. You'd be totally encouraged. So, every one of your friends said, yes, go for this. You're really good at it. You can really succeed. I have full faith in you. So our beliefs are often molded by situations like this, in which we hear encouragement or discouragement. We may hear it from friends, from family, from teachers. Sometimes you hear these stories. You have these class clowns, and they're not serious students, and the teacher tells them, you're never going to amount to anything. I think that's what they told Albert Einstein also, or one great scientist. He didn't do very well in school, and they, told him, you won't amount to anything. Of course, he somehow or other he didn't believe them, or it was good he didn't believe them. But you hear these things. I've heard it said that many of the people who end up in prison were told by their mothers when they were young that they were good for nothing and they were going to end up in prison. So, beliefs affect us. They're powerful. So, oftentimes, we have beliefs undermining our desire to commit to something, undermining a vow we want to make. And then there's this voice that's saying, you really can't do that. You're not strong enough. You're not smart enough. You're not good enough. You're not worthy enough. Whatever it may be. So, the wonderful thing that I saw about Srila Prabhupada is that he never dealt with anybody that way. Actually, he dealt with everybody the opposite way. He was encouraging. He encouraged us beyond what we thought was possible for ourselves. And because of that encouragement, we were able to commit and dedicate ourselves to his service and the service of spreading Krishna consciousness. And we did amazing things. And often when we look back at the things we have done in his service, we are amazed ourselves at how were we able to do that. There was a tremendous amount of encouragement behind us, which created a tremendous amount of belief in ourselves, belief in the process of Krishna consciousness. Krishna Shakti Vina Nahi Tara Pravartana. If Krishna empowers one, if we have Krishna Shakti, then we can help others become Krishna conscious. And that's exactly what happened. So it's important not to have beliefs which could undermine the very commitments you want to make. I could never be good at this. I could never do that. It's important to have beliefs not only that do not undermine, but not to have beliefs that undermine, but have beliefs which empower. By Krishna's grace, this is possible. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said, easy things become difficult without the mercy of Guru, or if you forget Krishna or Lord Chaitanya. And difficult things become easy with the mercy of Guru, or if you remember Lord Chaitanya. So, these are important points. And when we understand them, then we can key into the subject we're talking about today. Choice. That I can make the choice, I can become empowered to do much more than I think is possible. And that will help us deal with the bad workman blames his tools. So instead of seeing the negative side, what can't be done, and why it can't be done, we see what can be done. Now, another important point. You have the example of Prahlad Maharaj. Yes, so Sri Krishna 23 says, I have to remind myself that I can be a good devotee. Sometimes it's hard to keep focus in this age. I would say another thing you can say is that you are, because by nature the soul is pure, and we all have a relationship with Krishna. It just has to be uncovered. So even beyond saying I can be, which is good, we can also say I am. And it's a very powerful thought if you remember, particularly when you find you're running into obstacles, that it is your nature. Krishna consciousness is your nature. It's natural. It's not something foreign. Often it seems foreign, but it's not foreign. It's who we are. The conditioned life is foreign, which feels natural. So if we understand that, then we can develop a lot more easily develop confidence, because we're only developing something which is who we are. It's not something extraneous. Okay, so Prahlad Maharaj. Now look at Prahlad Maharaj's situation. Of course, he was fortunate. He heard from Narada Muni when he was in the womb. So that was a great boon, great benediction to have the mercy of the pure devotee. And he took it seriously, and so he developed Krishna consciousness very strongly. And then, as a young boy, that Krishna consciousness manifested more and more. But externally, he was in a situation which was not at all conducive to Krishna consciousness. So you might look at his situation and think, how could anyone be Krishna conscious in this situation where you're living with your father, who is a diehard atheist? You're being trained in a school which specifically is meant to train you in atheism and diplomacy. You have no devotee association. And any symptom of Krishna consciousness that you manifest totally disturbs your father to such a degree that eventually he tries to kill you. So obviously not an ideal situation, right? It's not like if you could choose a situation to practice Krishna consciousness in, I don't think you would choose that. But he was completely Krishna conscious, and there was nothing that could cause him to forget Krishna. Now, you also have situations in which devotees were in ideal situations. There's a story of a devotee named Krishnadas, and he was a servant of Lord Chaitanya. He traveled with Lord Chaitanya. And then he was lured away one evening or one afternoon or sometime when I don't know the exact situation, but maybe Mahaprabhu was sleeping or maybe they were separated. And he was allured by some gypsies, must have been very beautiful women, who lured him away. He actually left Lord Chaitanya's service and Lord Chaitanya had to come and rescue him. So that's an ideal situation, you would think, being in the presence of Lord Chaitanya. But you see there's a difference in attitude with Prahlad Maharaj and Krishnadas in these situations. That the ideal situation was not ideal for Krishnadas. And the situation which Prahlad was in, which was not at all ideal, was not an impediment for him, because he was fixed in becoming Krishna conscious. So in regard to Prahlad Maharaj, Prabhupada said, there are no material impediments. This is really interesting, because it seems like there's so many material impediments to being Krishna conscious. I mean, you just look at our society, and then you often think it's so difficult to be Krishna consciousness, living in this world, working in this world. It appears that way. But my point is, if that's how you think, you convince yourself that's true, then you develop the belief that, well, I can only be Krishna conscious to a specific degree because I'm working, I'm living in this society, I don't live near a temple, etc., etc. So you'll have all these reasons. And then if you line up all these reasons why you can only be a little bit Krishna conscious or spiritually aware, or not even a little bit, practically nothing, or not as much as you want, then the situations will serve to reconfirm, because that's your belief. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you think the other way, as I was originally suggesting, which is look at every situation and think, how could I become Krishna? How could I use this to be Krishna conscious? What will I have to do? My realization of the so-called situations which are not conducive or not very conducive to Krishna consciousness is it requires more spiritual intelligence, more spiritual determination and energy to deal with those situations. And often those situations can actually make you more Krishna conscious because they're more difficult, so you have to try harder. Does that make sense? It's more difficult. So what happens when things are more difficult? You often get better at something when it's more difficult. Isn't it? Or let's say you're on a team and you're going to oppose a team that hasn't lost a game. So now you're training. You're going to train really hard for this particular game. So you're probably, all the players are going to come to a higher level of capability than they normally would because the obstacle is so great. So it's an important point. Think how to deal with the situation. Don't succumb to it. Oh, this is just the way it is. This is the way I am. So if we say this is the way I am, then Prabhupada would say, then you have to change the way you are if it's not helping you become Krishna conscious. We often think in the wrong way, and our thinking gets us in trouble. Everybody knows that. Everyone has a mind, and Krishna told us the mind is the friend or the enemy. So often the mind works in a way that it becomes our enemy. So the whole point of Krishna consciousness, or one of the points, is to make the mind the friend. Otherwise you're always dealing with a negative, that you're always going uphill. You're always working against this mind. So you can befriend the mind. Vaishnavas pray to their mind. They try to create a favorable environment internally and see the external environment favorably. Now, how could you see the external environment favorably? Well, one way is to think that everything is meant to teach me how to become Krishna conscious. So that way everything's favorable. If everything that happens in my life is a lesson to help me become more Krishna conscious, closer to Krishna, closer to my spiritual master, then everything is helping me. And really, that's the truth. Because Srila Prabhupada said everything in this world is meant to help us become Krishna conscious, in the sense that he said that this world was created for our liberation. If the world is created for our liberation, then everything in this world is meant to help us, even what appears not to be helping us. So, if we look at the world and we say, okay, everything in this world is favorable for my Krishna consciousness, whatever situation I am in is favorable, then we have to ask the natural question. What's the question? How is it favorable? A lot of times it doesn't seem favorable, does it? A lot of times it seems antagonistic. Whatever the situation is, you ask yourself this question. How is this favorable? Everything is meant to help me become Krishna conscious. How is that happening? What is good about this? What am I meant to learn? How is this meant to help me? How can I deal with this in a Krishna conscious way? If you do that, you will often find the negative becomes a positive. That the negative situation becomes a source of your strength. You become stronger. Because now, if you say, how is this favorable? How is this helping me? You'll have to answer that question. You'll have to find out how. And by finding out how, Krishna will inspire you. Like, for example, okay, Adi Kavi says, I can't handle too many situations that make me fall into Maya. So, okay, then in that situation you would have to say, okay, how did I end up in that situation? Do I have to be in this situation, or did I create the circumstances which caused me to be in this situation? If this situation will cause me to fall into Maya, that would be one thing I would ask. How do I not end up in that situation? Or what can I do not to create that situation? Or the second thing I would say is, how could I turn it around? Is there any way I could turn it around and see that situation in a different way than I'm seeing it? Change my perception of it, change my belief, change the way I deal with it. Could I possibly do that? And it's an important option, because often when you do that, you'll find a way to deal with it. For example, you might say, I can't handle too many situations, but let's say there's a circumstance that's difficult for you and there's nothing you can do about it. Then you might think, okay, I need to chant better rounds, or I need to read more. I need to read every morning. I really need to be focused. I need to have sharp intelligence. I need to have a patience or tolerance, whatever is required to deal with the situation. And that could cause you, or it hopefully would cause you, to be more serious and careful about your spiritual practices, which would help you develop the qualities you need to deal with that situation. I'll give you an example. In that same book that I read about forgiveness, one of the other things that he said that really struck me, he said that if you've never been offended, then you would never have an opportunity to practice forgiveness, because if you're offended and you're hurt, then you'll feel anger or resentment towards another person. So to practice forgiveness in that situation would be to give up that resentment by forgiving this person. So he said, if you've never been hurt, then where would the opportunity be to forgive? So he said, in that sense, being hurt is a kind of blessing, because that blessing then causes you to elevate your consciousness above the petty level of anger, tit for tat, getting back, and release those feelings from your heart by raising yourself to a higher spiritual level. So then the resentment or the hurt becomes a blessing, which gives you, because it gave you the strength to go higher than you would normally have gone. Isn't that nice? And then you can apply that to, let's say, Adi Kavi, you can apply that to the situation you're describing. But here's a difficult situation. But now how could I see it in a positive way? And what would I have to do? The positive thing is, what would I have to do to transcend to some degree, or to in some way deal with the situation so I wouldn't be affected in a negative way, so my consciousness wouldn't be contaminated? Now, that's easier said than done, but it's a start. It's a way of changing it. It said, like, if you change the way you see things, then it seems what happens is that the things that you're seeing, they appear to change. If you change the way you see things, the things you see change. Well, it's easy to understand. Let's say you have negative thoughts about an individual, and you change the way you see this person positive. Let's see him in a positive light. Let's honor him, respect him, praise him. And by doing that, the person seems to change. Not that he's any different, but because you're looking at him in a different way, he seems to be different. So, we're talking about blame. Okay, in this situation, you say, I can't handle many situations. So now, you know the saying that Christians have, the devil made me do it. It's not my fault. Devil made me do it. You know, I'm not to blame. It's the situation that's to blame. So that's really the core of the problem, that we don't want to blame the situation. And if we continually blame the situation, then why are we allowing ourselves to live in a situation or to enter a situation which is causing us to fall or having a negative influence on us? Why don't we blame ourselves for allowing ourselves to be in that situation? Yeah, I just have to leave there if there are too many sense distractions. Yeah. It's not. I mean, this is, you know that story of a Jamil? A Jamil was born a Brahmin. And then what happened to a Jamil? I think I told the story a couple of weeks ago. He was raised as a Brahmin boy, and then he was out and about one day, and this young man and woman were embracing, kissing, and he'd never seen that before, and it was very, very disturbing to him. And he really didn't know, prostitute. He really didn't know how to. Of course, in Vedic culture, in Vedic culture, you didn't see those things. So, he was just like this innocent boy. He never saw that. Probably never saw a woman whose body was exposed like that, and So, here's a young boy anyway, you can imagine some kind of disturbing situation. So Prabhupada, what he said in the purport there, he said, well, here's a Brahmin, a Jamil, and he sees this and he becomes very disturbed. And he really couldn't control himself. He became so disturbed he wasn't able to control himself. And he ended up leaving his wife for another woman. And so Prabhupada described there that because the material world is a contaminated place, and because we run into situations like this, if we don't have some stability in our spiritual practice, that when we come into situations like this, we'll end up like a Jamil. We won't be able to deal with it. It's just like we'll just become unraveled, so to speak. Where Prabhupada said, if we have strong spiritual practices, then even in those difficult situations we'll be able to navigate. I mean, the ocean may be rough, but we'll still be able to navigate those rough waters. So, and then I would also say, in that navigation, we would navigate ourselves away from distracting situations as far as possible. And I think it is possible to do that a lot more than we think. A lot of times we just allow ourselves to, because we may be weak or we may be off guard. We allow ourselves in situations which are not healthy for us. So to practice spiritual life, the environment which we're in, we have to be conscious of that. And then when we're not in ideal environment, we have to have ideal consciousness. If you're in an ideal environment, your consciousness doesn't really have to be that ideal, because the people around you are ideal and they'll affect you in a positive way. But when you're not in an environment like that, then you have to be in an ideal state to be able to deal with it, and then kind of shed light on everything around you rather than everything around you shedding darkness. So, now I would like you, if you like, to ask some questions. So what do you say? I have a problem with a coworker? Yeah. Somebody said that? Yeah, avoiding places. Anyway, environment is important, but environment is not always, we're not always able to control it entirely, but we have more control of our internal environment. We do have control of our external environment. A lot also depends on our intention. I think what happens often, if we lose sight of what we want to achieve, what our intentions are, what our goals are, then we can become distracted. You ever heard the saying that obstacles are those things that you see when you lose sight of the goal? So, when you have a very strong goal, okay, now you're saying sometimes co-workers are envious. So let's go back to that situation of forgiveness, when we're saying that if someone offends you, that you're actually fortunate, because then you have to show compassion and kindness to be able to deal with it. So if people are envious, the last thing we want to do is stoop to a level of envy. Because, as we know, a devotee is one who's compassionate, he's merciful, he's kind, he's humble, he's not envious. And those are the qualities which we want to develop. And by developing those qualities, we become dear to Krishna, and that, by developing those qualities, our bhakti improves. And as a result of bhakti, those qualities also come. So, if we're in a situation in which people are envious of us, or they don't treat us properly, it is an opportunity, if we're in the right consciousness and we understand things properly, to show compassion and tolerance, to practice compassion and tolerance and equanimity and kindness, because those are the most difficult and trying situations to be kind in. When it's easy to be kind, it's one thing. So you could imagine now, in order to practice those qualities, how much Krishna consciousness would you need? Number one, you would need a lot of detachment, because if someone's envious of you, then it hurts, and you naturally want to fight back. So it requires some detachment, and it requires a focus on what you want to achieve in your practice of spiritual life. What is your ultimate goal? And your ultimate goal is not to fight back. Your ultimate goal is not to defend your ego. Your ultimate goal is not to be right and prove that person wrong. Your ultimate goal is to please Guru and Krishna. And you will please Guru and Krishna by showing compassion on that person. And then that way, that person might gradually begin to overcome their envy. So, you see what I'm saying? You take a negative and then you turn it around. Okay, if the environment is favorable, what's favorable about people being envious of me? What's favorable is that I am now forced. I'm either going to become more envious or less envious, right? It's the catalyst for something to happen, right? One way or the other, something's going to happen, either good or bad. So what's the highest goal? Highest goal is to please Krishna. To become like material consciousness. What is the highest goal of material consciousness? Pleasure, to achieve pleasure, satisfaction. We are the center, and everything in life is meant to revolve around our pleasure. If you take yourself out of the center, put Krishna in the center, you're on the outside, and now you are meant for Krishna's pleasure. That's the goal. That's the highest goal. Everyone can know the highest goal because Krishna tells us. And Krishna, really, it's love which makes the world go around. So the highest goal is to love God. Love it's the energy. If we don't love God, we're going to love something. So that's what everybody's pursuing. So it's in that sense, it's easy to understand what the highest goal. It's just the highest goal is the highest love. And the highest love is the love the gopis have for Krishna. And then we follow in the footsteps. And we want to develop that same love, that same mood. And that is a long, gradual process. And all these other things here where we can get distracted become less distracting the stronger the desire is to achieve that highest goal. Sometimes we forget the goal, we lose sight of the goal, we don't care about the goal, we give up on the goal, we think it's too difficult, too much work, and that's when we have difficulty. We may not be so advanced, but the desire, Krishna somehow or other, I want to achieve this, I'm not qualified, I don't know how I will do it, but I want it. And if that desire is there, then in all situations in life, that will be your compass. No matter what the circumstances are, you won't want to blame the circumstances. You'll just want to point your compass towards Krishna and see from where I am and in this situation, how do I get there? That will always be your guiding light, and that will always keep you going. And that way, you can remain true to your commitments because you're focused on what you want. Maya's business is to cause you to move away from that goal or forget that that is your goal. And it's possible. It's possible you can forget that goal. She's very powerful. Okay. Why do we all want to develop the same mood as the gopis who love Krishna? Well, it doesn't mean you want to be a gopi. It means that the gopis love Krishna. Their love for Krishna is the greatest. So the Shastra says that we should follow, we should study that love because it's the greatest, it's the highest. We should develop the mood that they have, even if one is not aspiring, or one has no idea, or one is not on the level that they could think my relationship with Krishna could be in a particular rasa, as a gopi, or a parent, or a friend, or a servant. Even way before that, still we are instructed that the gopis sacrificed everything for Krishna. They didn't care about their pleasure, their own happiness. They only cared about Krishna's happiness. So that is relevant for any relationship you have with Krishna. So therefore, in the mood of the gopis means that mood of self-sacrifice. They would give anything for Krishna's pleasure. Their pleasure was not important. Everything for Krishna. They just wanted to be like slaves. You think slave is such a bad thing, but to be Krishna's slave, it's the highest aspiration. Just to be there for Krishna's enjoyment. You just meditate on that. That's what happens when people fall in love. They're just there for the other person. They just want to be there for that person. So the intensity of that in relation to Krishna is millions of times greater, and categorically entirely in another league as well. Okay, I've heard devotees say they wanted another kind of love. Yeah, That's okay. Self-surrender. Srimati Radharani is the Ladini Shakti, the pleasure potency of Krishna. That means that everything about her gives pleasure to Krishna. And so the gopis, they exist only for Krishna's pleasure. That's what they're made out of. They're made out of pleasure potency. They're for Krishna's enjoyment. So that's we are meant to be. So our problem is we want to be in the center, and Krishna gets in the way because he's supposed to be the enjoyer, but I want to enjoy also. So there's this competition. That's the source of envy, and that envy ultimately is envy of God, because He has the position that we want in this world. We want to enjoy the wealth of this world, the opposite sex, the prestige of this world. Want to be powerful, control. These are all the qualities Krishna has in full. So even people who believe in God ultimately will come to a point where they'll actually not acknowledge it, but they'll manifest their envy of God. Or even if you don't want to chant, so let's say you've taken a vow to chant a certain number of rounds, you don't feel like it. It's in a sense a manifestation of envy, that now Krishna is taking center seat in my life, and I don't like that. I just want to do what I want to do. So the gopis' position is the total opposite. They just want to be there for Krishna, for his enjoyment. Okay, Sri Krishna 23 is asking, I am raising a Krishna conscious family. I travel twice a month to a temple that is in another state, so that my family can be surrounded by devotees. However, I struggle with Maya when it comes to shopping. Sounds silly, but it is my vice. What can I do to remove my inner need to shop? Oh, nice question. Burn all your credit cards and open a savings account in a bank in another state that you can't get to very easily. And put all your extra money in that bank and donate that money to Krishna. Here's a nice meditation. Okay, I don't know if it's going to help you, but I'm going to throw this out. This is one thing. We'll start with this. Think of all the projects and all the people you could help when I don't know what you like to buy. Is it clothes, or is it electronics, or whatever it is, let's say. Are you a man or a woman? If you're a man or a woman, I can guess. If you're a man, it's probably electronics, right? Clothes. You're a woman or a man? I would guess you're a woman. If you're a man, how many clothes can you buy? So, girl, yeah. Because guys wouldn't spend that much money on clothes, yeah. So, one meditation I have a lot is that when I have this money, I'm going to buy some. Well, okay, I'll go back even further. I'll go back to my father. My father was raised in the Depression, right? So that was whenever it was, 1929. So his parents had come from Europe, and they had nothing. In Europe, they were like living in a hut or something. He used to tell me they had like a hut with a mud floor, and then they came and started a business in New York, and they built a business slowly, and then they lived through the Depression. So he was very careful with money. But he had a successful business, so money really wasn't an issue for him. He never had to pinch pennies. But he still had a tendency to pinch pennies. And so whenever my sister would tell him she's going to buy something, she wants to get something, he would say, do you want it or do you need it? Or actually he would say, do you need it or do you want it? So he'd make that distinction first. Okay, so that's a good question to ask yourself. Do I need it or I just want it? And probably most of the time, at least half the time, it's because I want it, not that I need it. So then a nice meditation is, well, like this thing that I want, let's say it costs $50. What could I do with this $50 in Krishna consciousness? What could I donate to? Who could I help? How many people could I feed? How many books could I distribute or purchase? Or what project could I help with this money? Now, one of the principles of bhakti, which really is a wonderful principle, is that you should give up something which is very dear to you. So let's say you see some clothes and you go, oh my God, these are knockout clothes, I'd die to have these. And you want it so much. At that time you could think, the more you want it, the more bhakti there is by not getting it and saying and setting something like that dress would have cost $60. I'm going to set that aside and I'm going to donate it. The Mormons have this thing, I was told. I think it's the Mormons. I don't know how often they do that, but periodically on Sunday morning, the whole family doesn't eat, they fast till noon, till lunch. And then they calculate how much money they would have spent on that meal and they donate to a food project. I thought that's really cool, isn't it? Because you're making some self-sacrifice. I mean, it's one thing just to give some money, but to make a sacrifice, it's special. So that could be a good meditation. Those are two good meditations for you. Do you really want it, or do you need it, or do you just want it? And what could you do with that money? Now, another meditation. What's money for? Who's it for? Money is Lakshmi. So when Lakshmi comes to you, you're supposed to be the guardian of Lakshmi and use Lakshmi in Narayan's service, right? That's what money is for. Not that we can't spend money on ourselves, but we're supposed to be stewards of that money. So if I were you, I would say another way you could deal with it is that whatever money you get, take a certain percentage, say that will go to donate for Krishna conscious projects like Krishna.com or other projects that inspire you, and so that would automatically solve part of your problem of shopping because you'd have less money to spend. And I've heard this from my wife. A real solution is move out to the country because there's no good stores out here. When we moved out to Alachua, my wife said, there's nowhere to shop out here. So we cut our budget just by moving out here. So, and if you can't move out to the country, then it's kind of, it's like we all have our challenges, Everybody has their particular weakness. And so how can you, it's like if you like to spend money and like to buy clothes and things, you could buy nice cloth for the deities and nice jewelry for the deities. You take that propensity and you employ that in some way, decorate the temple, decorate the deities, buy things, sponsor an outfit like that. Take the propensity you have for spending money and spend it on things in Krishna consciousness. And I guarantee you'll actually be more satisfied spending money that way than you will on yourself. And Krishna will reciprocate. Try it. Try it. You know the best thing, if you think you're going to have difficulty with doing something like this, just try it like for a week or two. So it's not like, oh no, my whole life I can never do this. Just try it for a week. If it works for a week, try it for another week. And everything is easier when you have confidence that it's possible and it's something good that you want to do and it's important to you, and you just set it as a short-term goal, like a week. Let's try it for a week. Like we tell devotees, if you have a tendency to be critical of others, then try not to criticize anyone for a day. Oh, I could never do that. Oh, just make a sacrifice. All right, or don't criticize anybody for half a day. Do a blasphemy fast till noon. A noon blasphemy fast. A noon criticism fast. Won't criticize anyone before noon. At afternoon you can criticize everybody. But if you like it, then you can go for the rest of the day and try it the next day. So I think it's I want to tell you one more thing. I have a friend, and he told me, he said, our duty is to earn money and use that in spreading Krishna consciousness, because money's energy and money's something dear to us. And he told me a nice story. He said he once had no money in his spiritual matters. He had no money. He had a certain amount of money which he needed to pay his bills, and his spiritual master needed that much money for a project, and he gave it all, and he had no money. And within the next week, all that money, he said, it just came back to him. So, we also need that faith, and you'll find that, there's There's so much gratification in giving money to Krishna, and that's why he gives us money, so we can use it in his service. And then he might even give you more money. So then you can buy nice clothes for Krishna and nice clothes for yourself, and everyone will be happy. Okay, so it's 8:59, and does anyone have any other questions? Sri Krishna 23, where do you live? Adi Kavi has no questions. All questions answered. Norfolk, Virginia. Oh. Have some good malls there? You know, if you ever go to India, India's like one big flea market. Like, everywhere you go, people are shopping. Yeah. Everywhere you go, that's the religion. One of my friends said, he said, the religion in the age of Kali is not Harinam Sankirtan, it's shopping. Yeah. So you know, everywhere you go, drive through Delhi, it's like one flea market after another. It never ends, right? So it's the religion of the age. Everybody wants to accumulate things. And then you need a bigger house to put them all in, right? The bigger the house you have, the more you can accumulate. And that, you know, it's like we're meant to live. I think, you know, the best idea is we're meant to live simply. Keep our life simple, not complicated, so we have time for Krishna. Okay, so we're going to start a new series next week, and that series is going to be on forgiveness. It's really special. I've taught a course on forgiveness, so I've given it a lot of thought, and we go to some deep issues about it. And the real meditation is that forgiveness is a quality of a devotee, and it's an important quality. And the idea being that when we don't forgive, we're really the one that really gets hurt by holding on to that. So we're going to talk about that next week. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you here. Oh, next week it's possible we may be broadcasting live from the Alachua Temple Room, or the week after. So if things look different, that's going to be our new location. Okay, Hare Krishna, good night, and we'll see you next week.